Hello, everybody, and welcome to Patriots Law Group Live. These are military legal strategies for military divorce. My goodness, this is our last show, and I can't even say what the name is. That's so appropriate for today after 6 months of doing this very novel live stream. And when we say novel, nobody has ever brought a live stream to you with such a specific niche topic, really diving into education, resources, and legal insights about military divorce and providing those active service members, veterans, and even military spouses out there who are navigating a divorce and really need some resources out there to help them out. Until Patriots Law Group came along and decided to come up with this idea. And it could not have been such a success without our two amazing attorneys and those who specialize in military divorce. And that is Mike Lyons. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Maureen.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. We left it all on the table. That's why I couldn't get the title out, because we just left it all on the table.
Oh, I'm like, our last one. How appropriate that I didn't even know where we're at, and I don't even know what we're talking about, right? And so Pat Hughes is here, our other outstanding attorney. Welcome today, Pat.
Hey, Maureen, a bittersweet moment.
I know. We've spent 6 months together, and what I want to say to people out there is we brought new topics every other week. Today, our final one is why military experience matters in your with your divorce lawyer, especially when it comes to a military divorce. But I think what's important is, although we're ending this live, all of these episodes have been compiled. This is an entire resource library, so this is going nowhere. This is going to be on the Patriots Law Group website, right? So you have collected all of this. So people need these resources, which have been phenomenal on different topics. Every single time we've showed up, this is going to be available to them. So for you out there, this is going nowhere. You're just not going to see our wonderful faces every other week. So
unless they go to that library and watch it every other week, right? Yeah.
Right. But we're just not going to be live. So for those of you out there, this is your last opportunity to, ask questions where we can answer them live. So make sure you're taking notes. If you have questions, not even necessarily on this topic, but you want to throw them out for Mike and Pat, go ahead and do that. If you just want to support us and celebrate and grab your favorite beverage and, just enjoy this, we're here for you. So let's dive into why the military experience is going to matter, and your divorce lawyer is going to have some of this. So who wants to take number one? We usually do it in fives.
Yeah. No, I'll take on number one. And we've said it in the past, and we've sort of demonstrated it through this series, but just the deep understanding of the military benefits, particularly the pension and related assets. I now have non-military attorneys reaching out to me to be the consultant on these pieces, just to add what we're talking about, that experience level, and sort of being able to see many dimensions that maybe wouldn't ordinarily be noticed if you don't typically do this. So the topical areas, of course, being the Former Spouses Protection Act, the Survivor Benefit Plan, and the pension. And I'll give you a little example. Somebody that served in the military, like myself and Pat, and particularly in the reserves, which a lot of active, after Pat and I finished active duty, we went into the reserves. So we have an understanding of both components. And as it relates to a military pension, it's not an equal analysis if the service member is in the reserves as it would have been if they were on active duty. And just to give you a little example, in order to divide the military pension, the first thing that happens that the court does or the parties do is they figure out what portion is, quote, marital. and that's the period that was earned during the marriage. So if there's more service than married time, then it's a fraction of the total pension. So a lot of attorneys that don't have military experience just say, "Hey, Mike, how long have you been in the military service?" Say I'm the client. I say, "Okay, I entered in 2010," and they do the math and they say, "Okay, 15 years." And then, "How long have you been married?" And let's say I say 10 years. Well, they say 10 divided by 15. That's 2/3. But, and just assume that that's correct. The reality is, though, of my 15 years, I did 4 on active duty and the rest was in reserve status. And the value for my reserve pension of all that reserve time is just a portion. I don't get, a 20-year pension by doing a fraction of the duty. And so those reserve, the client or the attorneys that have clients who are reservists need to know 1 point is equal to a day of a year, effectively. They round it down to 360, but it's effectively a day. So I'm going to make this, public math is always dangerous. I'm going to make it a little clearer just to make this point super clear. In the example of if I had served for just 2 years and I was married for just 1 year, well, if my pre-marriage year, right, the year before I got married, I was on deployment as a reservist for a whole year, I got 365 points. I'm going to round it down to 360 again for math reasons. And then the year that I was married, I came back from deployment, let's say, and I did a regular old reserve year, and I got 60 points. Well, an attorney that doesn't know this and says 1 year divided by 2 is 50% is really going to do me as a service member a disservice, because they're going to give 50% of my pension on the day of the divorce. Somebody that knows the military is going to say, no, not so fast. It's 60 divided by 360, because the 60 points, that's all that was earned during the marriage. The 360 points earned before the marriage are non-marital. So that's 1/6. Huge, huge difference. So having that really deep understanding, that lived experience, is what a military service member brings to bear. And there's a lot of complexities about how these reserve points, I boiled it down really to its nuts and bolts. But once you've lived it, if you've read it, you really don't understand it. But once you've lived it, you know it for good. So I would say that's one of the essential reasons why a service member, and if you're dealing with a reservist, particularly someone who has reserve experience, is essential in your divorce lawyer.
Well, we're talking about living proof. I mean, isn't it, when you walk the path, that's always more knowledge, right?
Yes,
I mean, I always say, even with a business coach, don't you want to hire somebody who built a business than somebody who's helping you build your business while they're building yours?
Right.
It's the same thing. You're going to learn while you're doing it with them. So it's living proof. Let's watch somebody who's done it and knows how to do it. So that's great. All right. So number 2.
To add to that too, I mean, we were talking in this session, this last episode is kind of to tie it all together, I think, in some ways, right? But if you know what to go look for in discovery, like Air Force calls it a PCARS, I think, right? I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. But the point summary form that lays out 360 points on this year, only 60 points on this year, that would be one of the easiest ways to identify how many points can be attributed as part of the marital divide. So if you know where to look, then the answers can be fairly easy. If you understand it all, also, of course, there's those two elements too. But another key piece to I think the value that can be added with someone who has the military background is understanding how military pay and allowances work. There's a number of different things that a service member can be paid that might not even wind up on a W-2 for the pay that they're receiving, because maybe they're going TDY and they receive per diem and other things that are paid through a travel voucher that's not the normal income, and then it could be falling in some other place, and those things can be imputed income upon a service member to make the calculations for various support to the kids or the spouse. And so if you don't know where to look, then if you're representing the non-military spouse, then you may not be getting a full payout to what would otherwise be the appropriate amount under the calculations that the court would be using. That's another key piece to all this, I think, is knowing to go and look beyond just the W-2 of a service member to identify whether there's any other potentially imputed income that would affect the calculation.
Yeah, and that's something, for example, not in a divorce case, but Pat's rep in the midst and has won the case for a lot of Army reservists who are now getting back per diem. And here's an example of somebody who's trying to conceal certain assets. That per diem is not income, right? This per diem is really it's the employer, for lack of a better term, that is the military offsetting the costs for its employee who is the member, because they can't live their normal life. So you don't get taxed like that's income. And oftentimes this is on a travel voucher that you write it up, you submit it, and then you can find in your in your pay system an advice of payment, but it's nowhere to be found. And if I write on my deposit slip for my voucher, put it in this newly formed account that is with a bank that my spouse has never heard of, and I just let it drain in there, then it never gets noticed. And in the example of this back pay, Pat's won hundreds of thousands of dollars for these soldiers. And if you're in a divorce and that has happened, I hope I haven't given away any tips to somebody that's connected to one of those cases. I'm just kidding. But in any event, that's an example that there could be real money. I mean, travel vouchers typically are 1,000 or thousands, but occasionally, in the example for Pat, it can be tens or more than $100,000 in travel payments. So that's the type of thing that even we know it because of something different, or because we've lived it and thought through ourselves, wow, this would have been as easy as me putting another in account. So as lawyers, when we deal with our clients and represent them, we say, I wouldn't do it because I'm not unscrupulous, but I'm a lawyer, so I thought about what I would do if I was unscrupulous. So let's nip that in the bud and specifically ask in discovery, not just your income, show me, but produce every travel voucher you've had for the last 5 years. And that should bring it all up to the forefront.
And what is so Maryland, for example, Mike, the calculations, does it take the gross or the net?
Well, it takes the gross if you're talking about child support. Yeah. More often than not, if it's an advice of payment like this per diem and it's not ongoing, you're really searching for the asset, so the savings, because unless you're in an assignment, which I've actually seen some people that they're in an assignment where they are getting per diem for 6 months or a year, they wouldn't treat it as child support income purposes. So I always ask for those travel vouchers to find out if there's a dissipation of assets or hiding of assets, because, people who deploy or travel all the time pretty quickly will think there's a joint account that they're asking about for my next travel voucher and all subsequent ones. Let me change it to Navy Federal rather than USAA.
Yeah. Well, I ask because many of the service members' entitlements are not taxed. Basic allowance for housing, for example, is an entitlement that service members get the value of that full amount without having it taxed and taken from them. And so that's why that may end up playing a role potentially in how things are calculated, or the numbers are equated from one end versus the other between the parties.
Right.
Yeah. What's next?
What is next? All right.
All right. So are we at number 3? Because I know it kind of all runs together, so I never know.
We always like to throw you some curveballs, but yeah, we are on number 3. And this too, I would really say a lot of what we're covering today is really the lawyer with prior military service, and particularly service as a lawyer in the military, really brings just their personal experience. And here's the next example. If it's a child custody case, I walk in every child custody case that deals with a service member, and I know all, the policy and everything else, that the court's not supposed to hold that against the service member, and all of that, and we argue all of that. But I also know that there's a human that's making this decision, and they're viewing everything with their lived experience and their understanding that stability is generally the best. So what a military attorney, a former military attorney, can do is to really paint the picture of what military life is like based on their own experience. Can talk about, like Pat and I at one time were stationed over at Yokota Air Base. Man, that's far away, but we know that there's a rotator plane, so a plane that service members can use for free. And we saw with our own eyes people that would go away for the summers, by using this plane. We know about the child care centers that are available on base. And, so most of the service members that have children on a base, their child care provider is 2 minutes away. And the non-service member might have 30 minutes away, and the possibility of traffic jams and car accidents. And when you really start to line things up and say, okay, you work till 5 and the place closes at 5:30, boy, that's starting to look risky. And then you compare it on the other side and you say you work till 4:30 and they're available to 7 and it's 2 miles away and there's never a traffic jam. Now it seems less risky. We could talk about the base has a bowling alley, and it has the rec center that's specifically designed because they understand kids are in these really unique situations. So by able to even visually describe through our words and our lived experiences and what they feel when we say it, when we're like, no, let me tell you about the rec leagues that my kid did, or that my friends' children's did, or I did, it really becomes a much more persuasive, cohesive, and it really adds to the case that in this case, military parent is able to present. So I think that's one of the true benefits, is being able to speak from a position of experience rather than assumption, particularly because you're going to be arguing against, in my opinion, a lot of assumptions. You think they go away and the service member, has to pick up and move every 3 years. Boy, that would be real hard on me and my family. But you don't understand everything, the support mechanisms, even counseling. I mean, that's all right there on base. There's family support, all the support in the world to mitigate these issues, to at least get it to even, if not better, in some scenarios. So that's number 3.
Number 4. We've talked about it in the past too, on the myriad of disciplinary actions or things that people can run into when an allegation is made against them, and just an understanding of how the military disciplinary process can work, what the implications are to someone's security clearance potentially when allegations are raised, and how navigating through the military process might actually be the better course of action, as opposed to within the state courts, the civilian protective order versus a military protective order, for example. We've talked about that in the past, and how there might be benefits to even the non-military spouse to engage with that process within the military as opposed to within the state courts because of the potential implications to the service member's career otherwise. A civilian protective order could have the effect of triggering something related to a security clearance that might not occur through a military protective order, or triggering the inability to carry a firearm or things like that. Potentially, if there's an allegation of domestic abuse, all of these things can lead to second and third order effects that, if you have an understanding on how to play the game between the state court side and the military and interact with the military's command to help influence their decision making, then it can mitigate the risks and disciplinary actions that the service member might be exposed to, or help benefit the non-military spouse through the command's involvement, because they'll take an interest in making sure that service member who's receiving the entitlements of BAH, basic allowance for housing, with dependence rate, meaning they're getting paid more money because they have dependents. Well, there's a regulation that exists for each of the services that says when a service member gets more money through an entitlement because of their dependents, that they have to adequately financially support their dependents. And so that's something that you could involve the command potentially to get involved in, if you're the non-military spouse, to have the command order the service member to have to pay his dependents, or the entitlement can be reduced. And there's just a bunch of things that, if you know how to play the system, you could benefit one side or the other, regardless of who you're representing. You can try to take certain actions that normal civilian attorneys wouldn't be familiar with, that could gain your client a benefit. And one of the things that I was conducting some further research on recently relates around to the security clearance piece of things. The system has changed to something called the continuous evaluation process. And so there's now databases or systematic looking up of people's records through the state court systems and things like this that can automatically be flagging a person that there may be an issue. And so that, without the background and context of knowing what the issue is all about, can lead to security clearance being suspended and having to go through the revocation process. Whereas if the command's involved, command could say, you know what, I think a no contact order is appropriate here to help kind of distance things, but it doesn't become a matter of record that is viewed by just a system that flags a person and then all of a sudden someone's security clearance is jammed up. There's a separate determination that command will make to say, does this rise to the level of a national security concern that needs to be reported? And it may not. Under the situation that's presented there, it may not. But if there's now a civilian protective order that was pursued, it's going to show in the systems that our continuous evaluations have shifted to. And when there's no context to it and that protective order is in place, then it's likely to trigger a real and potentially lengthy process to challenge whether the security clearance should be suspended or not.
And we've seen that. I mean, you've dealt with that a couple of times in cases that I've had, and I've sent you that piece to work on that. So, yeah.
So, are we at our last one, number 5?
We are, yeah. No,
I think so.
And part of sort of the same thing that, or a similar thing that Pat is talking about, but just this idea of understanding the command structure and the culture. I mean, and when I say culture, if you haven't been in one of the branches, then or served, then you're thinking I'm talking about military culture. But really, maybe I should say subcultures, because each branch has its own sort of culture ethos, priorities, in the Air Force that, where Pat and I serve, we tend to, because of our mission set, be highly technical personalities that are, pilots and mechanics. You turn that wrench one too many times, and now you create stress on a bolt that when it's flying could crack. I mean, so everything's done by extraordinary precision. And when we tried cases there, or when we're talking to those commanders, either when we were doing reserve duty or when we are in one of these cases, we're taking their mindset, personality, and training into account. Having not served in the Army or the Navy and so forth, but now having lots of interactions in those occasions too, you certainly see cultural differences. The Marines, for instance, are all about discipline. They're less receptive to, let me tell you about the, what this case says and what it can be construed to mean in your situation, like perhaps one of the other branches could be, because they're looking at okay, what's the right answer here? A Marine is really looking at what's the right answer here in the context of ready to fight tonight, because discipline is such versus following the instruction to the T. There's a difference that once you've done this enough, you can really appreciate and feel. So we have conversations. I had somebody that called me, one of our other attorneys in the office who's handling the case. They don't have the military background. And in our firm, every case has one of us former JAGs or former active duty JAGs assigned. Every case gets a military JAG, is what we say, former military JAG, but that experience assigned to their case. So I'm that in this case. And she called me up and she wanted to discuss engaging the command on, the military member went and picked up the child in another state, brought them back here to Maryland, and is now, because of childcare, bringing the child into the duty station where there's, military working dogs. So, her instinct was just to say, hey, listen, he wrongfully took the child and the child should go back to that state. And I've been in those conversations and had those commanders come to me, and I'd say, really, that's the role of the state court. You shouldn't get involved in that. But on the other hand, a commander is going to be highly receptive to hearing, particularly once put on notice, that there's risk in his duty station. A child and a military working dog generally shouldn't be in the same place. And if it all works out well, count yourself lucky. If anything goes wrong, everybody is going to automatically assume it should have never happened, right? So there's no win here. It's all downside risk to that commander. So, to get to the same result, knowing how commanders are, being in those conversations, being shut down when it's, well, you should maybe do this. And I'm saying, that's not my role. We can sort of see that nuanced lane that is going to connect with the command's prerogatives, what they perceive as risk to them, to their unit, and leverage that to get the outcome we want. So really, that knowing that military culture, how to communicate with the command, structure our sort of arguments and our letters to not, fall on deaf ears. That's what a military experienced attorney can bring to the fight. And it's really unmatched legal services, I think, when there's military, particularly active military, parents or spouses involved in a domestic, litigation matter such as a divorce or a custody case.
What a way to kind of tie it all together. Pretty much 6 months worth of content, kind of tied in one sentence there, Mike.
Boom.
Great job. Yeah, boom. There we go. Great job, both of you. Now, that kind of finishes up this episode, but I think it, like we said, we kind of put the bow on for 6 months of unbelievable content, these legal strategies for military divorce and helping people, in the service, military spouses, veterans, really help navigate through this. And Mike, I know you always kind of want to give the caveat, a little bit of a disclaimer for people out there that this is, education, tips, insights, but you want to share that with people?
Yeah, no, just as we've said in the past, and if this is any viewer, this is the first one that they've seen, we always caution viewers that what we're attempting to do here is to allow for people to issue spot, allow for people to educate themselves and also educate their attorneys, hopefully to know, maybe not fully know what they don't know, but know what they need to really fully investigate. On base, there's free legal services, and would encourage somebody to supplement their non-military lawyers with those lawyers, or seek out lawyers. Doesn't have to be us. There's others just like us that have this lived experience we're talking about, and I think really just to boil all of that down, every case is different. And so even my examples, you might say, working dogs are involved in my case too. And I know the answer. Maybe, maybe not. So please take all of this simply as information to be considered in the context of a lot of other facts that a lawyer needs to help to develop actual actionable advice in your case.
Well, we want to thank everybody who's been tuning in over the last 6 months. And for those of you who have just tuned in for the first time, if you liked what you've heard, let me tell you, there are so many more episodes that we have done over these last 6 months. And these resources are available at patriotslawgroup.com. Of course, you can reach out to Mike and Pat there at the website if you need an attorney to help you with this, as well as so many other family law situations. Excellent law practice for you to help you navigate many, many legal issues. And this is very bittersweet because, like we said, this has been a very novel topic and a live stream that has not been brought to the public before. So, but I think we've come to the end. We have provided insights that have been so in depth that people have never seen before and never learned before. So kudos to both of you, Mike and Pat, for bringing this to the public and really educating them on this. So great job, great education. And I really applaud both of you for doing this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen, for help facilitate, this and helping us get this message out. And one thing I'll mention too is we've really tried to structure our website in a similar way, where from security clearances to military administrative matters, like the BAH case that I was describing earlier with Pat, family law, legal issues. There is a whole host of blogs in addition to these podcasts, and federal employment. We have so many clients that are former military, went into federal service, and now we represent them in MSPB cases, employment discrimination. So we try to be a complete legal resource for the major issues that are at the intersection of military life or a post-military life and civilian laws. So we invite everybody that's watching us now or watching in the future to check out all of our resources, and we're happy to help any way we can.
And you can also follow Patriots Law Group on obviously LinkedIn, but also on Facebook and YouTube. So go ahead and follow them on social media. So everybody, thank you so much for your support, and we really appreciate this. And like I said, we're going to miss everybody. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.